welcome back to our fourth episode of the Push and Pull podcast. And for our just audio listeners only, we're not just Michael and myself, but we have a special guest this time around. We have Michael Tatham Sr. with us today, founder of Tatham Inc. And just, Michael, would you mind giving us a quick introduction into yourself, who you are, what are you all about, what your motivation was? Just give us a quick intro of yourself.
Well, do you have the time?
We do. We do. We have all the time we need.
Well, I have retired from the company and I have passed it on to son Michael. He's actually exceeded my expectations.
It's good to hear.
Not just meeting them, as most businesses do. They're just happy to meet a customer's expectations. He has exceeded mine, and not only that, delighted me in what he's been able to accomplish in terms of bringing a very old systematic method into today's environment. And what I find interesting about it is it didn't change the method. It works in today's environment like it did 55, 60 years ago. So I'm not sure whether you want to hear the whole life story, but I had a father who, as Michael has a father, and I don't think I am as much of a tyrant that my father was. He was a very big man, very impressive man, a tall man with huge hands. And he dominated everything and everybody around him. He ran a construction company whose work was below ground, not above ground. His original training was in mining engineering, and mining people are always big below ground. So his company was specializing in putting in sewers and water mains and building water treatment plants for municipalities. And when I was 18 years old, he decided to bring me out and make me a job supervisor. Okay. How's that? Putting the son in a command position right away out of the box. And I was on summer holidays from university. So there I was, dropped into the middle of a job site that had probably 15 workers. They were putting in water mains, main water sewer mains. And my job was to get these men all working and get the job going. They all knew what to do. They knew I was the boss's son, so they were politely listening to me, but they went ahead and do what they always do anyway, whether I asked them to do it or not. It was a very, very cold, wet, rainy day. And a job site, when you're digging into the ground, turns all of the soil into muck, mud. By 10:30 in the morning, my father wasn't around. By 10:30 in the morning, everybody was busy working. They were busy trying to get the wheelbarrows and machines that were stuck in the mud unstuck, and they'd use the track drill machine to move other parts of stuck machines out. Trucks would come in to pick up material. They'd get stuck, and everybody was busy doing this. And my father drove into the site, and the men quickly said, "Here's Jack. Jack is here." And I noticed immediately that they started to work even faster and harder.
Okay.
So that's interesting. I wish they would have done that for me. He came on the site and he walked around, looked at the site and me for about 10 minutes, and then he pointed at me and says, "Come in, come here, get in the car, we're going for a drive." And he drove me up to the top of a small hill that could overlook the job site, and he opened the door, we got out, and he stood beside me, and he said, "Now look down, tell me what you see." And I said, "Well, I see a whole lot of people are really busy, really working hard, trying to get the job done." He said, "Yeah, but what about the rain and the fact that everybody's stuck and they're really not able to get any work done?" He says, "Well, they're all very busy. Well, but they're not getting any work done. So you're the supervisor, what are you going to do about that?" And I looked at it for a while, and I thought about it, and I thought, well, I'll be courageous. Well, I would just go down and tell them, you're all off for the day, I'll go home, we'll wait for a nice day to come back and do the work properly. And he said, well, you're absolutely right. Let's go down and do that. Okay? But then before we went down, he said, by the way, what's the most important activity you can see down there? And I said, well, I guess the moving of the soil from the ground and into the trucks and so on. He said, well, actually not. We put in pipe here. And the only time this company gets paid is when pipe goes in the ground.
Okay.
We don't get paid to dig the hole. We don't get paid to backfill the hole. We don't get paid to move anything around at the site. We don't do any of that. So the only thing that's really important here is laying pipe. And if we can figure out how to lay pipe continuously without stopping, it doesn't really matter what everybody else is doing. As long as the pipe is being continually laid, we are making money. And today, how much pipe was laid? I said, none. He said, well, that's why the decision you made to send everybody home was a good one. So I never forgot that. And I took that idea into everything that I do. And I came up with the term busy work versus value work. People like to be busy, especially if the boss is around. And that taught me something about the psychology of what goes on with people. Why is it that when the boss is around, everybody has to be busy? My father told me, he said, what I would prefer, if they're not doing value work, I would prefer they just stop and stand there still. Then that would tell me what to do as a manager. But when I come on a job site, everybody starts to work very hard and you can't tell what's really being done. But it tells me nothing's being done. And the harder they work, the more I know we got a problem here.
Yeah,
if they're sitting around thinking and stopping and not doing anything, then that's good for me because I know exactly where to go to solve the problem. And I've taken that into my life today, and that has become part of the systematic method.
Well, absolutely. While you were just telling that story in my facilitators and coaches brain, I immediately got to that's your definition of what is value-added work, the three definitions of that. It's the continuous aspect of continuously improving the process, identifying bottlenecks and where something doesn't work, and especially that the command and control hierarchy you were just thrown into doesn't serve any greater good. And just, Michael, to get you into the conversation, from a facilitator's perspective, what are you seeing the differences from what your dad is telling, all the stories, and to today's world? Where do you see comparisons, or what has changed over time?
I really don't think a whole lot has changed, to be honest. I think that it's a powerful story because I think when you spent, and I don't know how many employees there were at the time at Tatham Company, which is interesting, the name of the company, at the time, but when you look at some of our clients over the years, tens of thousands of employees, but we talk about maybe 80 to 90% of them are not laying pipe. They're running around doing other things to prepare for pipe, what they would constitute as necessary work. But that's a different mindset though. And so that's the same mindset that we try to instill in our customers is, at the end of the day, you got 300 steps here in what you're doing. What are the value-added steps? What are the ones that are actually the customer cares about, they're willing to pay for, and actually create some sort of change in form or function? There rarely is more than one or two of them, and sometimes none.
Yeah, that's even worse.
So how much time and money and energy are you putting into, a greater system that may not even deliver more than one step of value? It really it's a mindset shift. It gets you thinking about all the other activities and really, should you go wait in the parking lot instead of going into the office if you're really going to be working on something that's not, providing any value. So yeah, it's tried and true strategy.
Absolutely. And even
after, if I can just jump in before I lose the thought, because at my age, if I'm thinking about something, if I don't say it, it just drifts away. But that's now 75 years ago that my father made an impression on me. And it's interesting for all of you fathers and mothers out there in the world today. It's not what you say to your kids, it's what you do that they remember. And it's what my father did on that site that I can remember as clearly as if it happened yesterday. And that's where the definition of value add came to me. My father said the only time we're making money on this site is when pipe is actually going into the ground and each section is being connected to the next. That's when we get paid. And that's when the customer is paying us, and that's what the customer wants.
Yeah.
Okay? And my father also said on this job site, if we make a mistake when we lay that pipe, we have to go through the whole process of digging the ground all out again, taking the pipe out, repairing it, fixing it, doing what we should have done right the first time, and putting the soil all back again, with the chance of actually causing more damage doing that. And so on this site, you must do the job right the first time. Then he added, or don't do it at all, because don't do it at all is better than doing it wrong. And I never forgot that. Never forgot that whatsoever. And then he said, when you put pipe in the ground, you only have one chance to put it in properly, and that's the first time. Because if you'd have to take it out again, even digging down to the pipe, you'll end up with the backhoe shovel cutting through the pipe or doing something to damage the joint. So you have to do it right the first time. And there's only once that you can do that. So those three things came to me with that experience as to what he did, not what he told me. And I stayed with those three ideas right through to today. And as you know, in the boot camp and in the systematic method, we talk about that all the time. And to most people, that definition of value add seems kind of ridiculous or outrageous. Because everything we do here is value add. That's why we come to work. I'm being paid for every minute of the day, so it's got to be value add. When you take that definition and take it to heart, this is exactly what it is. 80 to 90% of everything that's going on everywhere in the world today is non-value added because it doesn't meet that criteria. And I decided I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to make this my mission in life, to bring that message out, to get people to believe it. And I learned that talking that message doesn't do anything. People don't listen to what you say. They listen to what you do. And that is the germ of boot camp. Boot camp, you come to boot camp, and that's where you do. You do the non-value added steps there. You look at doing them and realize how ridiculous doing that non-value add is.
Experience the failure.
And getting people to realize that. And so that's what boot camp is this experience I had on that job site at 18 years old, some 75 years ago or 70 years ago, stuck with me from then and has become the fundamental basis of what this business is all about.
Absolutely. And just in the first, I think, half a day, all the stories that you just told are the key learnings that you have on the first day of boot camp. You have to experience the failure. Getting it right the first time is crucial. Rework on non-value-added work, you try to avoid it or even question yourself what value-added work is in the first place. Maybe just to close that loop on what you see, Michael, in today's clients and what you see, Michael Senior, in your clients a couple decades before. What are the similarities in the questions that clients had back in your day, or what are you seeing now? I mean, you're still attending boot camps of Michael Jr. What are the things that you see that are still valid from your stories from way back?
Well, being around a long time, I guess they call that wisdom, or just by existing a long time, you get to see things over and over and over. And it's that repetition that I consider to be a wonderful thing. Repetition is a wonderful thing. It really sticks with you when you do it often enough. And what I've seen with the people today going through boot camp and the ones that went through it years ago, and people right from the day I was on that job site with my father, they have never changed. It's the same issue. It's the same stuff. I go down to the job site and I try to tell one of the workers, what are you doing there? I don't want you to do it that way. And they defend their position so aggressively. And they want to do it this way, and they come up with all sorts of stories about why it has to be done this way. And that's where what I consider to be a term that's well used nowadays, and it's confirmation bias. When people stick with something, they're biased toward that. And confirmation bias, to me, is twisting the facts to fit your beliefs. And critical thinking, which is what we do, is bending your beliefs to fit the facts. And it's as simple as that. most people today are trapped in confirmation bias, and it is a trap for them. And our job is to let them experience what it's like to be a victim and trapped in confirmation bias, and get them to decide how to work their way out of it. And that's where pilots and aviation comes in. Almost all aviation accidents are a result of confirmation bias. Because pilots believe in something and they follow through with that. Even someone else looking in sees that it's wrong, you can't get their mind off following through with that. So I think we're on a mission here. I think every commercial aviation accident that is investigated by the National Transportation Authority, they used critical thinking all the way through. And it takes a long, long time. And guess what? They're the only organization that takes the time to find the root cause and make the changes in aircraft in the future for safety purposes. But no business takes the time to do what the National Transportation Board does, because it's just too expensive. And my belief is, if every business did what the National Transportation Authority does with every problem they've got, they would be on top of it. And there's one company that I worked with years ago that actually did that. And the name of that company is called Apple. And the name of the guy that did it is, who he is, Steve Jobs. That's the way he was. So, and where is that company today? Well, it's right at the top of the food chain. Nobody can compete with Apple.
Definitely is. You just mentioned aviation, and that's a link that you both share. It's you both are aviators, you both are pilots, and maybe just from the link of Michael, what got your interest into pursuing your father's legacy, into buying into the company and continuing onwards with the systematic method? What got you interested in it?
Yeah, so 3 questions in there. I guess we can start with, I've been working in the business since, high school. So I came in, it was a great way to, do some odds and ends jobs to, make some money. So, at this point, I really didn't know even what he did, nor did I care.
You know what I
just
did
cared
to
about
him?
Girls.
What I did to him is what my father did to me.
Yeah.
Put him in the trenches.
Yeah.
I put him right in the heart and soul and basement of the business, doing the absolute basic grunt work that needs to be done. And without it, nothing happens.
Some question in the middle. When did you facilitate your first boot camp?
Oh, goodness. Probably so I graduated university in 2004. So probably 06.
Okay, when did you experience your first boot camp, or when did Michael Senior take you to your first boot camp?
Well, funny enough, I was helping co-facilitate one. It was my first time, and I remember because I was thinking, hey, we're not practicing what we preach here. We had, he was running a boot camp for a company that makes precision lasers called, what were they? Spectra Precision.
Spectra Precision.
And I think it was somewhere in the Midwest that we went, but anyways.
In Ohio.
Was it Ohio? Yeah, it was Ohio. And so I accompanied him and did some of the co-facilitation, meaning like making sure everything's working behind the scenes. Yeah. Kind of like the Wizard of Oz to some degree. And I remember going through the book and being very confused about what certain things meant, and he just got really excited about that. And I was like, why is he getting so excited when we're here running a boot camp and this could go horribly wrong if I don't do some of these things, and I can't figure out what half of these things are. And I think it was probably one of many lessons over my course of my life, but this one was a good one because I finally understood why he was so excited about it. Is because he really wanted to get that documentation to a point where even a high school student could do it. Yeah. And so I was my first exposure to building a checklist and building a process that is highly capable, does not require a lot of training. And I think now we've got it to a point where a high school student could run, back office work. In fact, we've done that before. We've hired people that have absolutely no knowledge or training of boot camp and have been able to take that document and do so. But the early years, working in the business, again, no interest. And I think it wasn't until getting exposed to, the corporate world, working at Nike and a few other jobs where I recognized, my goodness, I'm just a number here. There's tremendous amount of bureaucracy. Lots of ideas. I have that personality where I like to challenge the status quo. It's just in my DNA. And that was not taken too kindly. In fact, I actually got fired from one of my jobs for for challenging the status quo and not, having the political savvy to do it correctly, going over my boss's head, which was a good learning experience. But I think it was in between jobs where he asked me to come in and help out with some things, and I think he tricked me because I had no interest in working for the company. The idea was that I would have a job on the resume while I'm looking for a job.
Yeah.
Which looks good, it's different than, hey, I got fired from my last job and I don't really have any employment now. I mean, you don't look as a good candidate in that kind of scenario. So he again said, you could really use your help with, some of the fulfillment side of the business. And we had student kits going out, for example, which were these boxes full of materials that we provide to our customers when they're running boot camps. And so he'd throw me down in the basement and say, okay, go take a look at this thing from end to end. Like, what's going on here? From the moment the customer says, I want to run a boot camp, all the way through to saying, thank you very much, fill up our inventory for the next boot camp. And so I looked at that from end to end, and I just didn't understand why certain things the way they were, and questioned them. And of course, even here at Tatham, we had a team of people that had been working for you for many years that had their ways of doing things. And boy, did they get upset when I started questioning why we do things the way we do them. But at the same time, that's part of how I think. So that was a great opportunity to start to see that, hey, there's actually somewhere I fit in.
Yeah.
I'm asking the questions, but it's the team eventually got to the point where I was like, well, yeah, we need to ask these kind of questions to improve how we do things. And I think from there, it just my passion went into the product development and really refining the process of delivering a boot camp. Because anyone who's listening to this podcast who's run a boot camp before knows that it can be one of the most difficult things you can do in your career. So I really was hell-bent on figuring out a way it was kind of a goal of both of us, to figure out a way to bring the facilitators in training like yourself, Tim, through a week of rigorous training. This was face-to-face at the time. Obviously, a lot has evolved since. But to bring them through the experience and have them leave with the confidence to run a boot camp from beginning to end. Yeah. And I think prior to that, I had taken part in a few of the facilitator training sessions that a previous coach we had here at Tatham. And he got maybe everyone running one or two sections when they were here. And I could see when I took a step back, and this is not knocking his ability because he was very smart, was that they really didn't understand, even though they had been to boot camp, when you go to facilitate the thing, it's a whole different ballgame. You really got to know your information in and out. Yeah. You're not just lecturing people, the participants. You do that, you'll lose them. So I think the biggest value in that whole experience was, taking the customer lens and then really trying to figure out a way to get them leaving after that week with the confidence to be able to facilitate this thing and take it back to the organization and be successful. So yeah,
definitely. Yeah. I mean, just the very room we sit in used to be the executive breakout room.
That's right. It was
from producing Model A parts in the other room on our left to coming here and trying to fix stuff. And maybe just to continue questioning, what was the point from being fired at your job to coming in just to help out, to have something on your resume? What was the trigger for you to say, okay, I see my father's mission, and that's a mission that I can stand behind? I mean, I asked you at the end of our last episode why you do things. When was that point that you realized, okay, that's the mission that I want to attach myself onto and pursue?
I don't necessarily think there was a specific day where I'm woke up and I'm like, oh, this is what I want to do.
Do you want to say that was a process?
Yeah, it was a journey. And even to this day, there are core elements of it that remain, but my passion for it, I don't even know. You'd have to ask you what got your passion in it. The process side to me is very fascinating and super important. But I have this belief that if you get enough people together to understand something and you give them the time and the tools to do so, the ideas that flow are just incredible. So I think it's the innovation side to the work that I really like to, because I'm an idea person, I love ideas, but I think I learned very quickly over the course of my career with exposure with clients, and you threw me in with, senior executive teams when I could barely tie my shoe. So I think at that point I'm starting to see really quickly how they think. As I said before in a previous podcast, I got to see some great leaders and I got to see some absolutely horrible ones at the same time. So the moment I think for me where I'm like, this is my passion, I had a tremendous insecurity coming out of university because I left with a degree that I think I felt at the time was not going to be able to get me a job other than being a teacher, a high school teacher, which I'm not diminishing is a very important job, but I mean, I wanted to be in business in some respect, and I did not know what that was going to look like. And I didn't really have the confidence at the time, I think, to just think I had a degree. I didn't have an MBA. I didn't have anything like that. I had a simple bachelor's degree. I didn't have the confidence coming out of school to think that I could, work in any kind of organization, especially, the one that my father built, full of engineers. Sister's an engineer, 2 engineers at the time working for him. He's an engineer, electrical. So I felt like maybe that wasn't my place. But I think when we started to get through the product development side and really building people capability, I started to realize this business is less engineering and more about people, which is where I think I thrive. I know I thrive. And then that's at that moment I realized that the real mission of our company isn't to go in and fix processes. Yeah. Leave that to process improvement companies. What I realized our real core competency was giving people the voice and the tools to take their ideas and get them implemented to help the organization, the culture, and to feel good about yourself. And that's ultimately what we do. And that really helped me fall in love with what we do.
Definitely. Maybe to follow through and ask you, Michael, as being a family-run business, having a lot of history and then passing on the torch to your son, at what point, I know that you're vetting every master CPI facilitator by yourself. You want to hear them, you want to listen to them. At what point did you realize, okay, I can pass that on to my son? I feel comfortable enough to pass the torch on to Michael Jr.?
Well, I never felt comfortable about that because boot camp and this whole company is deceptively simple, but endlessly complex. Yeah. The same thing goes for most businesses and most companies that I had the privilege to work with. They asked me to come in and help them, and to me that was a real privilege to be asked. It made me feel good, made me feel valued, that I had something to contribute. But I brought with me what my father taught me at age 18. I walk into a business, and the first thing I'm looking for is, where is the pipe being laid? Okay. Where is the pipe being laid in this business? And I would ask questions like, what is it that really creates value for your customers here? And I get all of these different answers. And when I challenged those answers, I found that they were even more and more defensive about the answers they were giving me, which led me again to this whole term that we use a lot nowadays, which is confirmation bias. It applies in the cockpit of an airplane, it applies in businesses, in business management, in executives, and people who work on the front line. And when you're trapped in the grip of confirmation bias, you tend to favor information that confirms something you already believe. You fight for it to the death. And what is so insidious about this is you don't recognize that this is what you're actually doing. Most people don't recognize that. They believe strongly in their biases being correct. So when a person believes that a course of action that they're taking is appropriate, it takes a lot of evidence to convince them to go back and revisit the decisions they made and allow them to backtrack that decision-making process to find out where it went wrong. That's really what we do as a business, is getting them to go back through the decision-making process, which is very hard for them because they are firmly in belief of their bias. Yeah. And to get them off that is very difficult. And again, to this day, 50 years later, there's only one way to start that journey, and that is to put them through an experience that we call boot camp, which gives a significant emotional event to most people. Yeah. And then they start to understand the term, we're laying pipe here. And we have to figure out how to organize everything around that pipe laying so that the pipe is being laid continuously. And if you look at any company that's now putting pipelines across the country, they figured that out. They're actually digging the trench, putting the soil on a conveyor, laying the pipe, and the conveyor now brings the soil back and fills up the hole. And it's all continuous. Everything's moving continuously. The soil's coming out and going back in, the pipe's going in continuously. Yeah. And the whole organization functions around that. And I said, well, there's proof in a very large project that if you do this in a business, it'll work. And I've been part of doing that in a business. Yeah. For example, NASA. How could you ever imagine NASA doing something like this? And I first was asked to help out with the Goddard Space Flight Center, which is the largest NASA center. And they had just launched a satellite, the largest satellite ever, the Hubble telescope. And when they asked me to come in, they said, we have a problem. The telescope is not really being utilized by scientists. They've just given up on it, and they just want to go back to their optical telescopes, and they're not going to bother with the Hubble. So I put them through boot camp and came up with the term, where's the pipe being laid in the Hubble telescope? They're smart people. They answered it really quite quickly. When the scientist is looking at the data coming from the satellite and analyzing it and using the satellite continuously. That's the part that's important. So let's go and measure how often that happens. 80% of the time the satellite is idle. Yeah. And then we went from there. It went from 18 months for a scientist to schedule the use of the satellite or the use of the telescope to 3 weeks. And they said, that's ridiculous. How could that be? Well, they picked up on the term I was using then, which is a baseball game. How often is the ball in play throughout a baseball game? It takes pretty close to 3.5 hours to play a baseball game. And you take a stopwatch, the ball is only in play for about 15 minutes. Yeah. So the rest of that time is non-value added. And of course I get a very vigorous defense that that's not true. It's all very value added because we love to analyze the data, figure out what the sports stats are. And that's true. But from the ball game perspective, that ball's only in play in a very small portion of the time. And that's the NASA scientists took that idea, which they got out of boot camp, and reinforced there, and they applied it to the Hubble telescope. So that gave me the confidence after that to be able to say, we can do anything with this process.
Just to add, because you were alluding to the passing of the torch. Yeah. I mean, I'll just say it outright. I don't feel like there was a passing of a torch. I think you have your ways of running the business, and you have your vision for where you wanted the business to go at the time. And let's not sugarcoat it. It was a tough transition. Because I think, especially as a small business owner, it's like your baby. You've got everything tied up in your company. You've got a lot of emotion. You've got a lot of history. Yeah. And I think I would argue that this whole transition that occurred wasn't supposed to be like a handoff of any sort. I think it was more, well, you know what you like to do in the company. You know what you love. You're going to have to find your way. Don't just continue on doing what I'm doing. And so I think there was a large element of, to some degree, bootstrapping. I mean, yes, we had a tremendous history. We have a tremendous history. So we're not starting from ground zero. But then it's also, I can't just take, and I experienced this at the beginning because I just really did just take what you built and just continued it. And something wasn't right. And I think what I found, and this took a few years, to be honest with you, where I started to just see it, was that I needed to put my spin on things. Yeah. I needed to find my place and how I want things to be. And I had to learn a lot of things. I had to learn very quickly that you can't just, fulfill the services for the client. You actually have to understand their buying process as well. As a small business owner, sales is, king, and so is cash flow, right? So I think that I had to learn a lot of those things, and it took tons of failure. Look, especially the first few years, and it was just, at the time, 2008 and 2009, you think about it, the way the economy was and what was going on, really rough. I was second guessing myself. I was thinking, can I actually pull this off? Is this more his legacy? And I'm now, he's casting a big shadow and I got to live up to some shadow that he's casting. to be completely transparent and candid, it's like it was scary. There was a lot going on, and I wasn't really sure I could continue this legacy. And I think it was at that moment, and maybe it was a conversation between the two of us. He said, "Don't try and continue the legacy. Just take what you've learned and build something that you want to see built." Yeah. And I think that, with obviously the goodwill of the company, which you can't deny was a huge contributor, I think had me start to think of it almost like a startup. Yeah. Right? And the same thing happened again after COVID. When we had 3 or 4 clients, they're like, "Look, we don't have the budget anymore to do this, and we can't run residential boot camps anymore, and you got to rethink and reinvent yourself, and if you don't, then you die." Yeah. Right. So I think that was a big element, and I think also, to be fair, at the time, especially during my first few years working for the company, you were tremendously busy. So working with some big clients, they constantly, especially in those days, they wanted you face to face. So you're flying all over the country, trying to get things working at home base. And, I was able to learn a lot, but I also had to learn a lot on my own. Yeah. So I had to go out and make mistakes. But here again, I got the opportunity to work with some, big leaders that, we working again with NASA, worked with Walmart, a whole lot of big insurance companies, banks. Like I got all this exposure. And was able to start formulating my own kind of story and mission. And I think that's really what's having me fall in love with the work even more, is the opportunity to kind of put my own spin on it. Just as you're not laying pipe right now, or your legacy wasn't laying pipe, you took what you had from Jack Tatham. I've taken what my version of laying pipe from you, and do the things I love to do in the business. And I think that's kind of what's helped us be successful.
Yeah, definitely. And just the fact that I'm sitting here in Toronto, it's like you feel that passion that you have. I truly enjoy the conversations we have, Michael Senior. And just one thing both of you believe in, or is that you don't want to build a large consultancy business where you just body lease people left and right. You still have the candid belief that you want to teach the client and enable people. But maybe starting with you, Michael Jr., why do you want to continue, especially that part of the business, as your part of the philosophy that you want to go on?
I think I'm going to direct that question to you first, because you started the company and you know why. And then I have a similar reason, but let's hear from you for the origins of why you decided to keep a small team and transfer capability, and then I'll continue my version.
Okay, well, the old sage here will say, I didn't start the business. My father infected me with an idea by not telling me about it, just putting me in the environment and letting me experience it. Then asking me to make a decision, which was for me a huge decision, to shut down a whole job site. But I was just being funny. I thought, well, I'll just tell him that and he won't shut down the job site. The most important thing he did for my whole life at that moment was, he said, okay, not you're right, okay, let's go down and do it. And then we went down, and he put me out there to tell the men, you're off for the rest of the day here, it's raining, go home and have a good time, put your feet up, have a beer, and come back tomorrow if it's not raining anymore. And that's when I learned, I didn't put these words to it back then, but over my life, and in particularly to handing off the business to son Michael, I didn't hand it off to him. I just got out of the way. And my father got out of the way with me and let me learn on my own, and gave me the right to make mistakes, and didn't come beating up on me when I did make a mistake. He'd say nothing. He said, how'd you do? Well, I did blah, blah, this was terrible. He said, well, that's good. Did you learn anything? I said, yes, I did. He says, well, that was a good mistake. And so that's what I did. It wasn't a handoff. It was, I just got out of the way. And to me, to most leaders in businesses, the most important leadership skill is to get out of the way and let your people shine, let them produce, let them create, let them do what they really want to do, and that's the reason you hired them. So let them do it, and let them fail, let them make a mistake, and reward them when they do make a mistake for recovering from it.
Yeah, so empowering people and not just be there to solve problems for them, but gave them the capabilities to do it for themselves, empower them, give them pride in their work, even though you might throw them into making a decision over a pipe construction site, even though you're just 18 and you probably know less about the business than the people actually doing it.
That's right.
So empowering people was the reason that you really wanted to transfer knowledge to people at the front line. Was that the root cause?
Well, I think that came much later. I mean, I evolved into this business, but it all started off and began from the point of wanting to have a good relationship with people and wanting people to value any contribution you can make. And for me, my pay, I call it psychic pay, is when people reward me with, hey, you did a great thing, you really helped us here. And then as I progressed through my career, my clients gave me plaques, they gave me books, and I've showed you some of those.
Yeah.
They were really appreciative of what I was able to do for them. But what I did for them is allow them to shine and give them the tools to shine. And to make sure that their senior people and their senior managers got out of the way. And that was the first advice I give to every company I work with. I want to see the CEO. I want to meet the CEO. I want the CEO and the management team to go through boot camp. If you're not going to do that, don't waste my time. I'm not going to waste your time. Yeah. And I say that, and they say, this guy is either crazy and arrogant. We don't want him around here, which is good for everybody, because there's lots of people out there that do want to do this. And they would say, well, let's talk to this guy. And the first thing I would tell them, if you're going to bring this in, you have to learn how to get out of the way and wait until you're asked to help people out when they're in trouble. Because if they have the confidence to ask you, that's your time to shine as a leader. Yeah. But most people don't ask because they're afraid to ask, because the whole organization is operating under the envelope of fear. Yeah. And that's what has to go.
Yeah. And just redirecting the question back to you, Michael, does that resonate with you and why you want to continue this philosophy?
I guess part of it is I've seen the impact it can make. You know, I have plenty of friends, and I know you know people as well and are embarking on this journey as well. Tim, working in a consulting firm. The biggest pain points for a lot of the big consulting firms are implementations. Yeah. You know, and I never want it to be, nor do I want to have a team of consultants that have a solution looking for problems. Like I don't like that idea. I'm not saying it's not effective, and there are a lot of organizations around the world that don't have they don't have the capacity, and so they need to, if they're doing a merger or acquisition or some specified project that they need help with, they need bodies, they need that expertise right away, they don't have time to train. I get that. But what we're doing is we're changing the fundamental understandings of the business, grassroots. And you can't delegate that. Because then the next question is, if you're going to hire consultants to do this, the core part of your business for you, then why are you as a leader there in the first place? Why don't you just let the consulting firm run your company? And the second piece is, you've hired all these people to do these roles. Maybe let them have a say into how they can make it more efficient. Because they're going to be the first, I said this on the last podcast, they're going to be the first in line to want to implement this stuff. Yeah. But if you have a consultant come in, do a discovery period and interview everybody and take all their ideas and then put it into a sexy deck, they're going to resent that. They're say, why should I follow this? You come in here for 5 minutes and you pull all my ideas out, and now you're getting all these accolades while I'm sitting here at minimum wage, not really getting noticed. That's just, to me, is wrong. I just don't like that. That rubs me the wrong way. Yeah. So I want to continue to answer the question to be honest with you, for many years was very self-conscious about this. When I have a client like a Walmart, I remember the first conversation I had with the CEO at the time, it was in San Bruno. He said, well, how many people work for your team? And I'm like, oh, well, we have between 2 and 10 and we're very small. And I'm like, I feel self-conscious that we have such a small team. I've kind of changed my answer now. I said, well, we have a very small team and we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of employees. Our clients, they learn this stuff and they're all over the world. And the best part is that our clients pay their salaries, right? And I think to this day, I feel confident in that because, again, we're not a big consulting firm with a whole lot of consultants, with solutions looking for problems. Yeah. We are highly invested in a long-term, intimate relationship with our clients to help them think differently about how they do things. And this is why we've had clients even to this day for over 15 years. Yeah. We're not a fad or a flavor of the week. We're a honest, helpful partner.
Yeah, I mean, you know it from my history. I know both sides. So I've been on the side of where I've been doubted. It's like, what is that young guy telling me about my business? Like, I've been here for 20 years. I know the stuff better than you.
But, sure do.
But I think it's the underlying idea of this company of training and empowering people instead of just fixing a problem. I think it's the underlying thing. And you probably, if I remember correctly, told me the story of Imperial Oil and them spilling fuel in the winter. Would you mind just alluding to that story? Because I think it's a very powerful story.
Well, again, it's what goes on in the front line of your business. Get into the trench where the pipe is being laid.
Yeah.
Stand in the mud along with the people that are laying the pipe.
Yeah.
Okay? And just work with them. And after a while, they'll start talking to you. And when they start talking to you, put on your listening hat.
Yeah.
That's when the gold starts to flow about what's really going on in your business. And I learned that very, very early in my engineering career, where I was hired by a measurement and control engineering firm, and I designed a product. And it was a computer, actually, back in the 60s, if you can imagine a computer in those days, but we didn't call it a computer then. It was a control system. And I had designed this control system for a computer and sent it out to manufacturing to have them assemble it, put it together. Printed circuit boards back in those days when printed circuit boards were just coming into their own. And this particular day, I decided to go out to the production line where they're making the product that I had designed, and I went out and asked people, how's it all going? He said, it's fine. I said, how's the product there that I designed, this control board? Is it working? Oh yeah, it's just great, everything's working fine. One day I thought, well, I'm not getting any information here that I can use. They must know something about it. I decided, is it okay if I sit there and work with you and you can tell me what to do? And I'd like to work here for the morning or the afternoon. And they said, of course. So I sat down, because I'm from the engineering department. I know everything. I'm the expert. So they sat me down and told me what I had to do. And yes, I had to do some soldering and all of that. And as we were working away, finally the woman upstream from me, she says, by the way, if you designed this, why did you put that capacitor in that position? I have the damnedest time trying to put that in, and I have to sometimes put it in and take it out, put it in several times to get it right. Why did you do that? And I said, good point. I don't know why I did. I have no reason. Thanks for the information. And all of a sudden, that started opening up everything. They all started talking, because my response wasn't trying to defend what I did. My response was, I don't know. I said, I don't know. The engineer, all right, just a young engineer, I was much younger than you then. I said, I don't know. And they loved that. And they felt that I'm a safe person to talk to. Yeah. And I got this golden information. I went back and redesigned that control system 3 times in terms of the layout of the components and made them so it was manufacturable. Yeah. Okay? And who told me how to do that? The people who were doing the manufacturing. Yeah. How about that? And I never forgot that. And I made that part of the reason I exist. That's my mission. Yeah. Is the people on the front line who do the job over and over every day. They know more about what's going on than anyone else in the business. Yeah. Period.
And you feel it.
I stand for that to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can feel it in the way I experienced my training, I experienced my boot camp, I experienced you coaching me. Yeah. And just back to the story that I wanted to allude to, I think you told me in probably one of our first coaching one-to-one session was that Imperial Oil, coming back to actually listening to the people who know their job or who know the job better than you do. So would you mind just alluding to that Imperial Oil?
I didn't tell you the Imperial Oil story, did I?
No, you didn't. Yeah. But
well, we could. That's fine. That's what I love about podcasts.
That's another story. So I like to tell what I've experienced with other companies, and it's all people and psychology oriented. Yeah. Okay, engineering is great. It's the psychology that goes along with it that makes it powerful. So. The story of the Imperial Oil tank truck loading story.
Perfect.
And I never forgot that because I did what no other person did working for Imperial Oil. Now, Imperial Oil is a Chevron company, big company, okay? So the training department wanted me to put a training program together on how to load tank trucks, which are oil trucks that deliver fuel to houses back in the old days when most houses are being heated by oil, burning oil. And the truck would deliver all its fuel and go to this big loading station where these arms would come down, and they put these arms into the top of the tank, the truck, or the tank on the truck, and they'd open up the hatch and they would close the handle like you do in a gas station and stand there and hold it until it fills up. Well, they were having spillage, which is a major problem. And I said, well, all right, if you overflow the tank, why doesn't the operator just let go of the valve and that's the end of it? Yep. No, we spill 300 gallons at a time sometimes, 500 gallons, 1,000 gallons of oil gets spilled. Wow. Well, I don't understand why you want a training program for that. I mean, obviously there's something wrong with the operator. Either he passed out or died or he's not there. What are you doing? Do you mind if I go out and ride with a truck someday? And they said, oh, we can't do that. This is the training department. We're not allowed to get involved in that. I said, well, I can't help you unless you let me go to the front line. There's that front line coming out again. And they said, fine, go ahead. So I decided to go riding with a truck for a whole day. Okay. And I started talking to them, and finally they start to come up with things that the training department doesn't know about. Then one day, the temperature, I think, was something like minus 15 Fahrenheit, which is quite cold back in those days. And what happened is that the operator, rather than holding that valve closed at the top of the tank with the snow and wind blowing, and an empty tank, and it takes like maybe 20 minutes or so to fill up that one section of the tank, he grasps the valve, puts a block of wood that he has in his pocket into the valve, climbs down from the truck, goes into the little shed where the operator is, and stays warm. Okay, and then they get into a conversation in the little shed talking about probably women and sex and all the rest of it. But before you know it, the tank is filled up and overflowing, and that's the cause of tank truck spillages. The solution to that was not to tell the operator, don't use the block of wood, because the operator has to do that because the system is making him do that. The solution was allow the tank truck pumps to pump more fuel per second, okay? And as we dug into that, or they did, they found these are old pumps that are very slow and it takes hours. And you know that when filling your car with gas, if you got a tank, a filler up there, you wait and you wait and you wait, you get upset about it, especially if it's cold. So they changed all the pumps for filling that in the tank truck loading docks, and that solved the problem, because they just put that fuel comes out so fast that operator would not leave that top of that tank truck under any circumstances.
Yeah, just thinking about if you refill your own car, and then especially in the Canadian winter setting, that's not a pleasant way to do it. But just like you said it, and thanks for the initial story of you coming down from your high engineering office, coming down to the front line, looking to them, building that trust, listening to them. It's probably just set the stage for the Imperial Oil story.
It does, and it's not something I did intentionally. I just kind of learned by listening to what these people had to say, and I went, wow, I learned, because I'm young and I don't know all of what goes on, but I certainly learned how to, I didn't learn while I was talking, I only learned while I was listening. So I learned how to listen and learned how to encourage people to tell me the truth and then some. And
it's interesting how it's evolved, because I mean, you were a one-man show, and the idea was that you had developed a reputation in the industry for being a great problem solver, and I know you've told many stories over the years for that ability, but clearly the company evolved to a point where I think you realized very quickly, I've got 3 or 4 different customers, all of them want me at the same time, and all of them want me to solve their problems. I think now is the time to say, you know what, I'll just teach you how to do it, you do it yourself.
That's exactly right.
And so that's now evolved into, clients to this day say, well, what are your other clients doing? Where are they in the journey? And we obviously can share that, but the core capability and the secret sauce to what we do is that knowledge transfer.
Yeah.
Because can it scale quickly. You know, you get what, 20 participants in boot camp all thinking this way, and they go back to their jobs and they start challenging things. I mean, it spreads like a wildfire.
Or like a virus.
Or a virus. So yeah, I think that's a good segue into why the business model to this day and why I firmly believe in it as well. And I had the opportunity, and I think you did at one point as well, when you had decided you wanted to bring more what we called associates at the time into the business, you know, and try and get them to service the clients and teach them how to do it, and realize that there are very few people who want to give up that authority and that expertise. And I think many, and Tim, you're definitely one of those facilitators who gets more joy out of asking questions and steering teams in a direction, but then them taking the credit.
Yeah.
And you feel good about that.
Yeah,
there aren't a lot of people out there who think that way, and a lot of consultants. It's more my value is derived by my ability to solve your problems for you and to look like the smartest person in the room.
And that's how they get paid.
And that's how they get paid.
But that's something that, credit to you, Michael, that's something that you told me. It's not about you being or running the show or being front and center. It's my team, I did it. It's like, stay back, teach them, enable them, and when they deliver their improvement proposal, the leaders will see it and they will attach your name to it anyway. And just stepping back, enabling them, empowering them, it's more credit. Like, it, for me, it's the most amazing experience, just seeing the team owning what they found, feeling pride in their work. That's the most fulfilling feeling that I can have, and that's, again, it's addictive, and it's even more than diminishing if their pride and their energy is just left into nothingness.
Before I forget, because at my age, my thought comes into my mind, and before I can even speak, it's gone. And people my age will identify with that immediately. With the tank truck loading, which goes back many years, the moment of truth for me was not so much finding that the solution to their problem was not to train them, number one, because they had come up with this informal, unofficial process that they knew was wrong. So they're not going to tell you about it. But that's what they did. The block of wood was private, quiet. Nobody does it, but everybody did.
It was tribal.
It was tribal. So I went back to the training department who hired me, and I said, tell you what, I got some news for you. This training program you're wanting to put together, it's not going to do anything for you. Nothing whatsoever. That's not the problem. Training is not the reason why you have spillage problems. And the moment of truth for me was, they wouldn't accept that. They had to put the training program together because that's what the training department does. And the boss of the training department says, we have to have a tank truck loading program done somehow, some way, and we have to put it together for safety. Or they came up with confirmation bias. I didn't call it that then, but that's clearly what it was. And I said, well, why would you want to do that? It's not going to do anything. He says, Michael, that's not your say, not your business. Well, I just brought you back something from the front line of tank truck loading, which is when they load the tank truck, and you don't want to listen to it, and you don't want to be part of it. You're going to put a training program out and call it tank truck loading. It's going to do nothing to the people that are loading their tanks. Matter of fact, you're going to lose your credibility. Yeah. They're going to just take that and put it in a box and say we don't care about it. And yet they still went ahead and put a tank truck loading program together. And I said, I can't do it. I just can't hire somebody else. And guess what? They did hire somebody else, but they didn't get rid of me. They made sure that I was there for all other kinds of things that were in the business. And I ended up doing all kinds of things for other departments in that company. They didn't fire me because I refused to do it. They actually respected me and took it to heart. And made sure that this guy doesn't get away. We want him part of his team. Most people don't have the confidence to do that. Neither did I. I just said, I can't put a training program together because I've been on the front line with these tank trucks and when they're being loaded. And any training program you ask me to put together, if I put my name on it, they're going to look at that and laugh. And it's going to make me feel bad. That's why I said no.
Yeah, but I think that's again the underlying part of what we do. If you get to a point where you truly understand the root cause, you don't want to hotfix stuff because you know it's not going to work. Why would you want to attach your name to something that you know is just wasting anyone's time? Yeah,
it's a great ongoing theme, and you and I talk about this all the time, Tim. That the intuitive, and this happens in boot camp, the intuitive response when something's not going well, or there's a problem, or it's not meeting a standard, is to provide training.
Yeah.
Get online, do your training. Then now that you're trained, then you're capable.
Yeah.
And so this whole notion of put the training aside for a moment and really understand what's going on in the process and why it's creating that kind of outcome. Figure that out first.
Yeah.
And then you bring in the training once you've got it simplified, right? And I think that is something that's definitely missing.
Yeah, it's also, even though it's like something we don't like talking about, but this entire boot camp and the way we do things is untraining people from bad habits that they created over time. And I know we talked about it a couple of days ago. When you're a pilot and you're in your setting and you go through your checklists, the more senior a pilot you are, the less you want to adhere to your checklist. That's something that we talked about.
Pilots, especially new ones, hate using the checklist. They rely on their memory and they just want to get through it quickly.
Yeah.
And let's get in the air. Most pilots, when they get into the cockpit, they don't want to sit on the ground and just go through all the procedures. They want to fly.
Yeah.
That's what flying is all about. So going through a checklist is a bit of a pain, and you really have to be forced as a pilot to use a checklist.
Yeah.
But if you go into the cockpit of a 747, or a space shuttle for that matter, if you want to see checklists in use, that's where you'll see it big time. So here's a checklist that these guys are going through. And if you were watching it, one point of the checklist I really like is pilot or co-pilot says, gear down. Pilot reaches for the gear down handle and puts it down. Co-pilot says 3 in the green. Pilot says 3 in the green, check. Then all of a sudden, 10 seconds, 15 seconds later, co-pilot says gear down. Pilot puts his hand on the handle and says gear down, 3 in the green. Co-pilot says 3 in the green, check.
Yeah.
Another 10 seconds pass. Co-pilot says gear down. Pilot says, puts his hand on the gear down, 3 in the green. Co-pilot says check, and it's over with. And you say, this is silly. This is stupid. Why would they do that? And so I ask these questions. Why do we do that?
Yeah. Because
some aircraft like this land with the gear up, and it's really tough on the belly of the airplane. It scratches the paint off. It upsets the customers in the back.
Well,
they have to go out through the airbags and be taken away in emergency vehicles. And that happens to this day, and that's why we do that. And that's only one of the items on the checklist. And I thought, that's interesting. A child can actually go through that checklist in a 747, but a child cannot fly a 747. A pilot can fly a 747, and yes, the pilot does use a child-type checklist.
Mm-hmm.
And you ask yourself, why? Because the pilot is human, and he's going to miss something. And the best time to miss something is when there's an emergency, or there's chaos, or there's a change that goes on.
Yeah.
All right. During the approach to landing, there's a bolt of lightning, or there's icing. There's something that's off the normal. That's when the pilot says, "Oh, I'm going to react."
Yeah.
Pilots are trained. No, you don't react. Pull out the checklist, because you want to make sure that you go through the steps properly and not miss anything. And that's all the Tatham systematic method is a checklist. Because if you look at each of the items on that checklist, a child can do it. It's not that difficult. It's simple. And I've had grade 6, 7, 8 students go through boot camp, and they can go through that. They understand it very easily. It's not complicated. So people look at this and say, this is stupid. This is too simple for me. I go to NASA. This is too simple. No, they didn't say too simple. They said, we love this. We're full of PhDs and engineers, and we have very complicated methodologies that consultants bring in for us to use. And the last thing we want here at NASA is a complicated methodology to help us simplify things. That's the last thing we need. We love what you do. Don't change it. Let's just keep doing it.
I
So
think
I've never forgotten that.
that's the underlying part. Simplicity is sophistication,
Yeah.
and especially whether it's a high stakes situation like in the 747 and something goes wrong, or it's a business situation where you're in flight and then regulation hits or the market changes. All that is why, I mean, Michael, you know that's why we call it a business simulation. And it's just untraining behavior of over-sophisticating things that don't need to be over-sophisticated, and provide a system of where you can just go through the checklist, get rid of political stuff, get rid of interpersonal stuff, just follow it, and you will see the results.
Yeah, there's another element to it as well, which is the culture.
Yeah.
You know, in aviation, there is a culture that comes along with it. Safety is an important part of that. And I would argue, and I joined you when we went to Wichita, Kansas, to when you were doing your certification of flight safety.
At a flight simulator.
In a flight, and those are real flight simulators. And I got the opportunity to fly a King Air and a couple other, I think it was a Premier One, which is a Raytheon jet. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong very quickly. And it's not that you don't know how to handle any one of those things. The question is, do you know what to focus on first?
Yeah.
Because if you're focused on the wrong thing, and I saw this very quickly, I mean, you always told me this before, when you get your pilot's license, it's really when you get your IFR rating that you learn how to fly. When I was
That's on instruments
that's
only.
instruments only. You really see it, especially in the simulator. You could be on a 90-degree bank and not even notice it because you got such great target fixation on solving something in the cockpit, and you could flip the plane right upside down and not even notice it.
But
And
you
it's-
notice your pen falling out of
if you have a pen,
hitting the ceiling.
this is why all pilots have pens in their pockets. But the idea is, and this is a philosophy that they bring in aviation, is aviate, navigate, communicate.
Yeah.
Before everything else, fly that plane. Don't worry about ATC. Don't worry about anything else. You just got to make sure you're focused on that. And there's actually one more term that I brought to heart, and I use this in business all the time. There's a panel of identifiers, we want to call it, or they call it enunciator panel. And so it's got all these little lights up on the ceiling of the plane, and anything goes wrong, they're going to light up and tell you something's going wrong. And when you first see it, when you're learning how to fly, and you first see one of them go off, it gets your attention because you're sitting here, everything's fine, you're an autopilot.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of decisions to make. It's kind of boring, to be honest with you. You're just sitting there, maybe chatting with the ATC a little bit. And then it goes off, and then you look at it and you're like, oh, okay, let me look into that. Let me pull out the manual and go through my checklist. And then another one goes off. You're like, oh, wait a minute, what's that all about? And then another one, and then another one. And suddenly you're in a position where there's a whole lot of them going off. You have to be able to determine which ones am I focusing on right now.
And then the autopilot automatically disconnects.
And then the autopilot disconnects, and then you got
got a handful
you got your
of
handful. And there's an analogy they use. At this point, you're juggling a whole lot of balls. You just got to figure out which ones are rubber and which ones are glass that you can't drop.
Yeah.
And the great thing about the checklist, again, is that it'll focus you on what's important. So you go back to the back of the checklist, you have something called emergency operating procedures. And if there's anything engine related, if there's anything, you know where the most important items are. It'll help you focus on those items. Let that enunciator panel go off like a Christmas tree. Who cares?
Just a notification.
Just a notification. Focus on
your
flying that
information.
plane.
Yeah.
So you do that in business as well. There are a whole lot of firefighting
Go off every
exercises. You know this, Tim. You've been involved in those exercises before, right?
But it's just for the listeners who might not be aviators.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a perfect analogy. Whether you juggle with glass or you juggle with something that won't break immediately, you have to juggle with that stuff on a daily basis. Whether it's new technology being implemented, old technology not being supported or not running up to the parts that you want to do, or having processes that are lighting up left and right.
Yep. Disgruntled customers.
Oh yeah, usually.
High turnover, got to replace job. There's all sorts of enunciators.
All pilots in the cockpit know killer items, we call them. And there's only 5. And you say, well, how come there's only 5? Why not 6 or 8? And you know what the answer to that is? Because I have 5 fingers, and I can hold it up and say there are 5. And those are the 5. If you get those killer items solved, you're going to live.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're going to die. And to me, every business has killer items. And I took that into working with one of the largest IT companies in the world, IBM. And I had the CEO and all their executives go through boot camp, and they just took it right through the whole company. And I brought the killer items out, and he said, well, these are not killer items for us. They're what we call executive hot buttons. And we don't have 5. We've only got 3. And there's only one that we look at a time.
Yeah.
And we don't look to the next one until we finish the first one. So they love that killer item thing. And it goes on in business as well. And I used to bring that to all of our clients. They love the aviation analogy because everybody has flown in an airplane, and everybody turns their life over to the cockpit and the people that are up front. And that's
a trust. You got to build a trust.
And that's a good analogy to use. And I would say keep using the pilot one because, or the aviation one, because it's got all kinds of stories that apply to business every day. But unfortunately, in business, we have crashes going down, and maybe not people dying, but businesses are dying for the same reason that people die in an aviation accident. Yeah. But we don't treat the business the way we do aviation, and I think there's a lot to be learned that way. And that's what we as a company, that's why we call boot camp a simulator, because it is taken from an aircraft simulator. It's to put people into a mode of chaos where they're trying to look where the shiny items are, grab the shiny item. And in boot camp, we put the shiny item up there so they will grab it. And when they grab it, they die. And we want them to experience death and come back to life again. Yeah. Then guess what? You've got their attention. And they'll listen to you and say, that's interesting. And that's what I love about boot camp, and that's what I love about what we evolved into. So boot camp didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a creation of my idea. One day I woke up and said, we're going to have a boot camp. It was 30 years of all these little things that have happened, in my experience anyway, that I wired into the boot camp to get after that psychology side of science, all right, which is get the psychology right. The science is easy. You'll learn it in grade school. So that's what boot camp is all about. And I've seen other people try to copy boot camp, but guess what they do? They miss the psychology completely. And they come up with something that's just kind of rote and teaching oriented and quite frankly boring and beneath their dignity and mine. So we've got something here that's really hot. We know it's hot. We just have to get more people to experience it. Yeah. So before I die, and that's probably not too far in the future, I'd like to see everybody in the world experience boot camp. So that's like 4 or 5 million people in the next 2 or 3 years. So get busy, folks. Yeah.
Just get back on an airplane and just fly all over the world. Right. No, I think that's a perfect statement to round out this episode. I think we probably ran over our target time, but that's fine anyway. I think it's everything that this boot camp...
I got to jump in on you again. You said time. We ran over our time. In boot camp, there's a big clock there, right?
Yes.
You know why the clock is there. It's, to synchronize the computer or the simulator, and all computers have a clock, of course, which is synchronized. But the clock is like, as you said, a sports clock. Everybody's watching that clock. And when it counts down, that's when the pressure really gets good. Yeah. That's why the clock's there. We want to create that pressure. We want to see people looking at the clock. Yeah. We want that pressure. We want that chaos. We want them to run around and not use the checklist and see how quickly they get into trouble.
Thank goodness we don't have a clock here. No pressure on that.
We don't have a clock here. That's right.
No, but it's just perfect to round it out. So everything that we stand for, everything that we preach, everything that we compress into boot camp or into the systematic method is rooted in your history and your experience as well, Michael. This is not something artificial or you came up with in your brain overnight. It's something that evolved and you can feel it. Like I know both perspectives, from a participant's perspective onto a facilitator's perspective. It feels natural because the concepts are not overly complicated. It's you listen, you show empathy, and you want to set up people for success. And I think that's I think maybe Michael, just some last words from you. On that.
Yeah, I mean I agree with you. I think also it's not a game.
No.
And I can't help but go online once in a while and Google business simulators. And you go on, you'll see all sort of computer simulators where
they're all out there.
Yeah, there's a lot. And look, some of them look like they're a good time. This is a whole different ball game. We've refined this over 50 years. It's even to this day, even yourself, Tim, have provided a tremendous amount of feedback and insight that continuously mold it. But again, at the same time as it changes, it also stays the same. The roots of what makes it so powerful, I would argue, will outlast even me. So with that, I'll leave it with that.
First of all, thank you very much, Michael Jr., for your time. And even more so, thank you, Michael, for your time, for your wisdom, for your stories. It's been a pleasure talking to you the past days, the past weeks and months, and it's always a pleasure talking to you.
No, it's fine. For me, it's a good experience to get my brain running again, and it just sort of runs on its own like autopilot. So I just let it go. And I guess there's a bit of a lesson there is all of you just let your brain, it's there, your intuition is there, free it up, give it a voice and let it fly. That's what it's all about.
So I'm really looking forward to the next episodes where we have a one-to-one Michael Senior, and we'll continue digging into the roots of where you came from, the roots of boot camp, some stories. We're looking forward to it. Thank you for everyone listening, and hope you'll tune back into the next episode.